Hello everyone, welcome to this new video of our series Virtualization with Hyper-V. In this video, we are going to learn about how we create virtual machines in Hyper-V. So we will work on Hyper-V Manager and learn how we create the virtual machines inside it. So let's get started and open our Hyper-V Manager console. So let's open Hyper-V Manager first. We can click on Start and search for Hyper-V Manager and click on it, and it will open the Hyper-V Manager console. That's how Hyper-V Manager looks like. To be able to create virtual machine, you need to go to your Hyper-V host name. My Hyper-V host name is this. So you just right click on it and you can click on new and then click on virtual machine. It will open the wizard which will help you in creating that virtual machine. Another place where you can create virtual machine from is this one. You can simply just click on new and then click on virtual machine and it will open the same wizard for you. In here you need to click on next. Now on this page you need to provide the name for your virtual machine. So let's say our virtual machine name is VM5. Now you see this checkbox, it says store the virtual machine in different location. That means the default location to store the configuration files of the virtual machine is this one. C program data Microsoft Windows Hyper-V. If you do not specify a different location, it will use this default location to store your configuration files of virtual machines. We have already discussed about the configuration files and all the virtual machine files in our previous videos. I have provided the link of the previous video for that in our description. So we are going to provide a specific location for saving our virtual machine configuration files that we are aware where exactly those are. So we can click on browse and then we'll go to our D drive, we'll go to VHDs, and we are going to save the configuration files at this location. So just click select. We can also provide the name of the virtual machine so that it will create a folder of that name. Next, we click next. Now on this page we need to specify that whether we want to create this virtual machine as generation 1 or generation 2. We have discussed about the difference between generation 1 and generation 2 virtual machines in our previous video. I would suggest you to go through that video so that you get the understanding of all the virtual machine components as well as what exactly Gen 1 and Gen 2 virtual machines are. For a brief, Gen 1 virtual machine supports BIOS, which is the legacy firmware, and it allows us to create 32-bit and 64-bit guest operating systems in our Hyper-V host. And Gen 2 virtual machine supports UEFI and it allows us to create only 64-bit guest operating systems for our virtual machine. So for now, we are going to stick with generation 1 and then we click next. And here we need to provide the RAM information, the memory information about our virtual machine, that how much RAM we are going to specify for it. Now there are two options in here. First is that you need to provide a startup memory. Now what is the startup memory? Whenever we start a virtual machine, it will get this startup memory at the initialization. So it will start with 1 GB RAM, and then if we are providing the dynamic memory to it, then it can expand accordingly. So in here we have provided 1 GB as this startup memory. Now we need to check this box if we need to use dynamic memory, and if we are not going to use dynamic memory, we can simply just uncheck it. If we uncheck it, this virtual machine will only have 1 GB of RAM and it will not expand it itself because we are not using dynamic memory now. It will be the fixed memory. So to be able to make it dynamic, you need to check this box, and then later on you can specify the minimum and the maximum amount of RAM as the limit of dynamic memory. Then we click next. In here we need to specify the virtual switch that we are going to connect this virtual machine with. So in our previous video we talked about the virtual switches, type of virtual switches. So we need to make sure according to our network configuration that which virtual switch we are going to connect this virtual machine with. So I have got these virtual switches created for lab purpose. So we can select any of these virtual switches. And in our upcoming videos, we will learn how we create these virtual switches. So for now, we are going to select vinternal1 as a virtual switch for this virtual machine, and then we click next. On this page, we need to specify if we want to create a new virtual hard disk for this virtual machine, or if we are going to import an existing one. So there are two options that we have. One, we can create a new one, or if we have an existing virtual hard disk of any other virtual machine that we need to import to this virtual machine, we can use that as well. So for now, we are going to create a new virtual hard disk. Now in here, you need to provide the name of your virtual hard disk as well as the location where you are going to save that virtual hard disk. Now, as we have saved our virtual machine in D, VHD and VM5, so it has automatically picked up the location and saved this virtual hard disk to this location. Here we need to specify the size of this virtual hard disk. So for now, we are going to give it, let's say 15 GB. Okay. And the second option is use an existing virtual hard disk. If you have an existing one, you can simply browse it and then click next. And third option is if you want to attach virtual hard disk later on, you can do that as well. You don't have to specify a virtual hard disk right here. When you are creating the virtual machine, you can attach it later on as well. And then we will click on next. On this page, we need to specify that which operating system we are going to install in our virtual machine. So till now, we have provided RAM to our virtual machine, virtual hard disk, and we have specified the firmware of our virtual machine. Now we have configured a complete bare metal situation here. So we have got the hardware, and now we need to provide or install the operating system in our hardware, and then our computer will be ready, right? So there are a few options in here. You can install an operating system later on, and you can just keep this virtual machine as a bare metal so that you can install operating system later on. Or you can specify an ISO image and boot this virtual machine with that. So we can simply just click on image file and then browse the location where your ISO file is saved. So let's say my ISO file for Windows Server is saved in this location. So I'll just open this one. Another option we have in here is if we have a bootable floppy disk, we can specify that as well in here. So you will just need to browse for the bootable floppy disk, and then you can use this option. The last option is if you have a network based installation, or if you want to do network based installation. That means if you have the bootable media saved on your network share, then you can specify the network share location as a last option here. So for now, we are going to specify an ISO image to install an operating system in our virtual machine, and then we click next. So in here we can review all the settings that we have specified. So virtual machine name is VM5. It is of type Gen 1. It has got 1024 MB as a startup RAM, and we have specified it as dynamic RAM. Then we have connected it to the network switch, to the virtual switch vinternal1, and the hard disk that we have provided is saved at this location. And we have selected an ISO file for Windows Server to be able to install the operating system in our virtual machine. And finally, we click Finish. So now, as you can see, we have got our VM5 virtual machine in this list, and right now it is in the off state, because by default, whenever we create a virtual machine, it is in the off state, and then we need to start. So to be able to start a virtual machine, you simply just right click on it, and we have got several options in here. We need to choose Start from here. You can monitor the state of this virtual machine at this bottom location as well. Under VM5, you can see that this virtual machine is starting up right now. We can see the Windows logo. So to be able to connect to the console of this virtual machine, we right click on it and we click on Connect. So here we can see that our Windows Server is ready to install on this virtual machine. We need to go through all these steps of installing a Windows Server, and then our virtual machine with Windows Server 2019 as guest operating system will be ready to use. So we just need to provide the specific information in here, and then we click next. We click install now. So we all know that while installing Windows Server from ISO image takes around 10 to 15 minutes. In here, we need to specify the edition of Windows Server that we are going to install. So we have several options in here: Windows Server 2019 Standard Evaluation, Desktop Experience. We have got Data Center Evaluation, and we have got Data Center Evaluation Desktop Experience. So the options where we have Desktop Experience mentioned, that means it will be the GUI format, and the one which does not have desktop experience, that will be the core operating system. So if we install any of these two, Data Center Evaluation and Standard Evaluation, it will only install the core operating system of Windows Server 2019. It will not have a GUI. You will just need to use the command line and operate the operating system. So for now, we are going to use the desktop experience version, and it will be the standard evaluation, or we can use data center. Now we can see that Windows has started installing. Next, it will ask us to set up a local user on this virtual machine. So the default username that it provides is administrator, and we can set up the password now. This will be the local user and local admin for this virtual machine. So we'll click finish. And now it's finalizing the settings. We can maximize the resolution in here. And finally, our virtual machine is ready to use. We'll log in with the password that we have just set up. For the first time, it takes a bit of time because it sets up the user and the local user profile. So it should just take a few more seconds and then allow us to log in. And now we are logged into our virtual machine. After creating this virtual machine, let's take a look at the configuration files and virtual machine files that got created at the location that we specified. So let's go to File Explorer, and this is the location where we stored the virtual machine files DVHD, and we gave the virtual machine name, and it creates a default folder with the virtual machine name itself as well. So if you go back, click on VM5, and you can see there are three folders that gets created when we create a Hyper-V virtual machine: snapshot, virtual hard disk, and virtual machines. Snapshot is the folder that contains the configuration files regarding a snapshot, and if there is any snapshot that we have created. So there is VMCX configuration file, VMGS guest state file, and VMRS, which is the running state file of a virtual machine. Then we have virtual hard disk in here, and we can see that because we are using Windows Server 2016 or Windows 10, so we have VHDX file format that got created. The AVHDX file as well. So this is called differencing disk. Whenever we start a virtual machine, AVHDX file gets created for that, and as soon as we turn off a virtual machine, this AVHDX gets merged into the VHDX file in the parent VHDX. And then we have got virtual machines folder. Inside this, we have the configuration file, guest state file, and the runtime state file of that particular virtual machine. Now this number that you can see in here is called the virtual machine GUID. So this is the identifier for this virtual machine, and whenever you need to specify an ID number for this virtual machine, you can use this number. So as our virtual machine is ready to use now, let's take a look at some options which we have available in Hyper-V Manager for this virtual machine. So if you right click on this virtual machine, we have a few options in here that we'll go through. First one is connect. So connect is used to connect to this virtual machine. Then we have got settings. So once you click on settings, you will see the properties of this virtual machines and all the components that we discussed in our previous video. So in our next video, we are going to take a look at each and every component and see how we can change them and how exactly we can add or remove the hardware for a virtual machine. Next, we have got turn off. So turn off means just taking out the power cable of a computer and then it will be turned off. So the same thing works in virtual machine as well. Then we have got shutdown. Shutdown is the graceful shutdown from inside the operating system. So we can shut it down from here as well, and that will be a graceful shutdown. Next we have save option. So save is used to keep this virtual machine in saved state. Now what does that mean? That if we are doing something in this virtual machine and we want to release the resources that this virtual machine is using, but we don't want to turn it off and lose our work. So in that case, we can just keep this virtual machine in saved state. Let's take a look at the practical of this thing. So let's connect to our virtual machine. Here is the virtual machine, and let's open a notepad in it. I have given very small RAM to this server, so that's why it's running a bit slow. So we'll open notepad from WindowsR and let's just type test in here. Okay, now we have got this notepad process running in this virtual machine. Let's go back and see that it's using 1.5 gigs of RAM and 11% CPU. Now what we will do, we'll just keep this virtual machine in saved state. So we click on save and you can see it's saving its state, and we don't want to connect to it right now. Now you can see that its state is showing as saved and it's not using any resources now from the physical hardware. Now if we want to connect back to it, so we click connect, it will show us that this virtual machine is turned off and we need to start it. So when we click on start, you can see it showing restoring. We'll maximize the resolution for it. And we will log in again. And here we can see that the notepad is still open, and because if we would have shut down the computer or turned it off completely, this notepad would have gone. But because we used the save option for this virtual machine, so its state was saved and this notepad is still open on it, and now we can see that it's using the resources once again from the physical hardware. So that's how the save option works for the virtual machine. Then we have pause. So if we use pause, then we can stop this virtual machine and we will not be able to use any options on this virtual machine. We can see that right now we are not able to use anything on this virtual machine because this is in the paused state. Now what does pause mean in terms of the resources? That it will no longer be using more resources than what it has right now. It will be paused on what resources it has. So it has got 1.5 GB of RAM and CPU usage is 0. So it will remain on this. It will not increase because we will not be able to use the virtual machine anyway. And then we can right click on it again and then we click on resume to be able to resume the operations on it. And we can see that we are able to use the virtual machine once again. Alright, next option that we have is reset. So resetting a virtual machine means that we are going to completely turn it off. Let's suppose that our virtual machine has stopped responding for some reason. In that case, we can use the reset option so that it will be reset completely and it will start again. Then we have checkpoint. Checkpoint means snapshot of a virtual machine. So we can create a checkpoint or a snapshot if you want to restore this virtual machine in future to this point where it's working right now. So for that purpose, we can use checkpoint. So if you click on it, you will see in here, it will start creating the checkpoint, and then it will show right in here that it has created the checkpoint on this date. So we have created the checkpoint on 22nd. and the time is 2:17. All right, so that's how we can create the checkpoint, and we can also delete the checkpoint from here while clicking on delete. And before clicking on delete, let me show you, we can also click on apply if we want that we are going to apply the checkpoint once again, because the changes that we made didn't look good, so we need to restore our virtual machine to a previous point. So for that purpose, we can restore it to this checkpoint as well. So in that case, we'll click on apply. So for now, it's just delete it, otherwise it will take a lot of space on our hard drive. And you can see that it's merging. Next is revert. So if we have made some changes, we can just simply click on revert to be able to revert those changes. Now in case of move, we can move these files to a different Hyper-V host. So let's say we need to migrate this virtual machine to a different Hyper-V host, so we can use the move option for that. So if we have a cluster available or Hyper-V hosts, we'll be able to migrate the virtual machines as well. And if we do export, then it will export the configuration files and the virtual machine files of this VM as well as the virtual hard disk, and then we can copy those files to any other Hyper-V host or any other virtual machine to be able to recreate a virtual machine like this. So we will do the practical of move and export in our upcoming lectures, so that we are able to understand how these things works. And we can use a rename to be able to rename our virtual machine. So these are the options that we can use for a virtual machine, and I hope you got the understanding now that how we create the virtual machine and how we use all these options. So that's it for today, and thank you everyone for joining in. We will be learning in our next videos how we set up networking and storage of our virtual machine, and how we do the export and migration of our virtual machines. So stay tuned on this channel, and please like and subscribe if you're liking the content, and I'll make sure that I keep it as easy as possible for you guys. Thank you. Have a great day.